In a quiet little town surrounded by lush green hills and winding roads, there stood a cozy diner named Chuck's Corner Cafe. The cafe wasn't fancy or modern. It had chipped paint on the walls, mismatched chairs, and menus scribbled on chalkboards, but it was loved by everyone who visited. It served hearty portions of comfort food, golden pancakes dripping with syrup, juicy burgers stacked high with toppings, and steaming bowls of homemade soup that warmed even the coldest days. For years, locals had gathered here to share stories, over coffee while travelers passing through stopped in for a taste of home. Among the staff at Chuck's Corner Cafe was Emily Carter, a young woman in her late 20s with curly brown hair and a warm smile that could light up the room. Emily worked tirelessly as a waitress, balancing trays laden with plates and glasses, greeting customers with cheerful hellos, and cleaning tables without complaint. She took pride in making sure every guest felt welcome, whether they were regulars, who came in daily, or strangers just passing through. Despite her hard work, life wasn't easy for Emily. She lived with her younger brother Jake, who was still in high school, and their parents had passed away a few years earlier. As the primary caregiver, Emily juggled long shifts at the diner with taking care of Jake, helping him with homework, and managing their modest household budget. On most days, Emily found joy in her job. She enjoyed chatting with familiar faces and hearing about their lives. Some customers became like family to her, sharing bits of wisdom or asking how Jake was doing in school. But there were also tough days when customers snapped at her for things beyond her control, left tiny tips after large bills, or simply acted unkindly. These moments weighed heavily on Emily, though she rarely let it show. She prided herself on staying professional no matter what, but inside she sometimes felt frustrated and unseen. One particularly slow afternoon, the diner was almost empty. A soft breeze drifted through the open windows carrying the scent of fresh grass from outside. Emily moved from table to table, wiping down surfaces and straightening salt shakers. Her feet ached from standing all day, and her mind wandered to the pile of unpaid bills waiting for her at home. Just as she finished tidying up the last booth, she noticed a man sitting alone at the counter near the cash register. He wore a faded flannel shirt, worn jeans, and a cowboy hat pulled low over his eyes. His presence seemed unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the rustic charm of the cafe. Curious, Emily approached him with a polite smile. "Hi there. Can I get you anything?" she asked, setting a clean menu in front of him. The man glanced up briefly, revealing sharp blue eyes beneath the brim of his hat. "Just coffee for now," he replied in a deep, calm voice. Something about him struck Emily as oddly familiar, though she couldn't quite place where she might have seen him before. Shrugging it off, she filled a mug with hot coffee and placed it on the counter. As Emily turned to leave, she hesitated. The cafe was so quiet, and the stranger seemed approachable enough. Maybe venting her frustrations to someone new would help ease the tension building inside her. After all, what harm could come from sharing her thoughts with a random traveler? With a sigh, she leaned against the counter beside him. "You know," she began casually, "this job isn't always as fun as people think." The man raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. Encouraged, Emily continued, her words tumbling out faster than she intended. "I mean, don't get me wrong, I love serving people and making sure they're happy. But some days it feels like no one appreciates the effort we put in. Like today, I had this one customer who complained about everything. The eggs were too runny, the toast was too crispy, and then left me a $1 tip on a $30 bill." She threw up her hands in exasperation. $1. Do they not realize how much work goes into this? The stranger nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. His silence only fueled Emily's momentum. "And it's not just the tips," she went on, lowering her voice slightly. "Some people treat us like we're invisible. They snap their fingers instead of saying excuse me, or they act like we're robots programmed to serve them. It's exhausting, you know?" For a moment, the man said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, in a quiet tone, he responded, "Sometimes people are dealing with their own struggles. They might not mean to be rude, it's just easier to take it out on someone else." His words caught Emily off guard. She hadn't expected him to offer advice, let alone such thoughtful insight. Still, she shrugged it off. Maybe, she admitted. But that doesn't make it any less frustrating. With a faint smile, the man added, "Things aren't always what they seem. You never know what someone's going through, or who they really are." Emily frowned, unsure what he meant. But before she could ask, another customer walked in, pulling her attention away. She thanked the stranger for listening and hurried off to greet the newcomer, leaving him to sip his coffee in peaceful solitude. Little did Emily know, her innocent conversation with the man at the counter would soon lead to unexpected revelations and change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. As the afternoon sun filtered through the diner's windows, casting golden streaks across the worn wooden floor, Emily found herself drawn back to the stranger at the counter. There was something calming about his presence. Perhaps it was the way he sat so still, as if completely at ease, or the quiet confidence in his voice when he spoke. Whatever it was, she felt comfortable enough to keep talking, even though she normally wouldn't share her frustrations with just anyone. "You'd think people would understand how hard we work," Emily continued, leaning against the counter. "Again. I mean, it's not like flipping burgers or pouring coffee is easy. We're on our feet all day running around trying to make sure everyone's happy. And yeah, I get it. Some customers are great. They leave nice tips, they say thank you, and they treat us like human beings. But others," she trailed off, shaking her head, "it's like they forget we have feelings too." The man nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. He didn't interrupt or try to argue. Instead, he simply listened, which only encouraged Emily to keep going. "Take last week, for example," she said, warming to her subject. "This group of tourists came in, probably 10 of them, and ordered practically everything on the menu. I spent an hour making sure their drinks were refilled, their orders were right, and no one had to wait too long. When the check finally came, I thought, okay, maybe this will be a good tip. You know, something that makes up for all the running around I did." She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. "They left me $5. $5 for 10 people. Can you believe that?" The man chuckled softly, the sound warm and genuine. "Sounds like quite the adventure," he remarked, his tone light but sincere. Emily couldn't help but smile faintly at his response. It wasn't pity or judgment, it was understanding, as if he truly grasped how frustrating such situations could be. Emboldened by his reaction, she pressed on. "And then there are the entitled ones," she added, rolling her eyes. "Like the guy who demanded I remake his sandwich 3 times because the lettuce wasn't crispy enough. Or the woman who yelled at me because her iced tea didn't come with extra lemon slices. Honestly, sometimes I wonder why I even bother being nice to these people. Half the time it feels like they don't notice. Or worse, they take advantage of it." The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with those piercing blue eyes. "Do you ever feel like walking away from it all?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. The question caught Emily off guard. She hadn't expected him to ask something so personal, and for a moment she hesitated. "Well, yeah," she admitted after a pause. "There are days when I think about quitting, finding a different job where I don't have to deal with rude people all the time. But then," she glanced around the diner, taking in the familiar sights. The scratched countertops, the faded posters on the walls, the cozy booths where families laughed together. Then I remember why I started doing this in the first place. I love helping people. I love seeing their faces light up when they taste something delicious, or when I remember their usual order without them having to say it. Those moments make it worth it, even if they're few and far between." The man smiled faintly, nodding as if he understood completely. "That's a rare kind of strength," he said quietly. "Sticking with something because you believe in it, even when it's hard. Not everyone has that kind of resilience." Emily blinked, surprised by the compliment. No one had ever called her resilient before. In fact, most days she felt anything but strong. Yet hearing him say it made her chest swell with pride, however small. "Thanks," she murmured, feeling a blush creep into her cheeks. "I guess I just do what I can to get by." For a while they sat in companionable silence, the hum of the diner's old jukebox filling the air. Emily refilled his coffee cup absent-mindedly, her mind replaying the conversation they'd just had. Something about the man's calm demeanor and insightful comments made her want to keep talking, to spill out all the thoughts and worries she usually kept bottled up inside. But before she could continue, another customer walked in, jingling the bell above the door. "Excuse me," Emily said quickly, straightening up. "I should probably go take care of that." The man gave her a slight nod, his smile lingering. "Of course. Thanks for sharing your story with me." As Emily turned away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this stranger than met the eye. His words had been oddly comforting, almost wise, and she found herself wondering who he really was. Was he just a traveler passing through, as she'd assumed? Or was there something else beneath the surface? Over the next hour, Emily stayed busy serving other customers, but her mind kept drifting back to the man at the counter. Every time she glanced his way, he seemed content to sit quietly, sipping his coffee and observing the room with keen interest. Occasionally, he would jot something down in a small notebook he pulled from his pocket, though Emily couldn't tell what he was writing. His behavior struck her as curious yet not suspicious, more like someone gathering information rather than hiding secrets. Finally, as the dinner rush began to pick up, the diner filled with chatter and clinking dishes. Emily darted between tables, delivering plates of food and collecting empty glasses. By the time things slowed down again, she realized the man was gone. His coffee mug sat empty on the counter, along with a folded piece of paper tucked under its base. Curious, Emily picked it up and unfolded it. Inside was a short note written in neat handwriting. "Sometimes, speaking your truth can change more than you expect. Thank you for reminding me of what matters." Beneath the message was a signature, Charles Norris. Emily froze, her heart skipping a beat. Charles Norris. The name sounded familiar, but it took her a second to place it. Then it hit her. Chuck Norris, the legendary actor and martial artist, and according to local rumors, the owner of Chuck's Corner Cafe. Her stomach dropped as realization dawned. She'd spent nearly an hour complaining about her job, and possibly insulting his restaurant, to none other than the boss himself. Panic bubbled up in her chest as she imagined the consequences. Would he fire her? Reprimand her in front of the entire staff? She cringed at the thought, already dreading what might happen next. But as she stared at the note again, she noticed something else. A crisp $100 bill tucked inside the fold. Her breath caught. This wasn't punishment, it was gratitude. Whatever Chuck Norris had taken away from their conversation, it clearly wasn't anger or disappointment. Instead, it felt like respect. Still holding the note and the money, Emily sank onto a nearby stool, her mind racing. What had she just stumbled into? And what would happen now that Chuck Norris knew exactly how she felt about working at his diner? Later that evening, as the dinner rush began to wind down and the last few customers trickled out of Chuck's Corner Cafe, Emily felt a mix of relief and unease. The diner was finally quiet again, with only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of silverware being stacked in the back. Her feet ached from hours of running around, but her mind was far too preoccupied to focus on physical discomfort. She couldn't stop thinking about the note and the $100 bill, left behind by the man she now knew was Chuck Norris. As she wiped down the counters one last time, the manager, Mr. Harris, stepped out of his office and called everyone into the break room for an impromptu meeting. Normally, such announcements were met with groans or eye rolls, especially at the end of a long shift. But tonight there was a strange energy in the air. The staff gathered hesitantly, whispering among themselves as they tried to guess what the meeting could be about. Emily lingered near the back of the group, avoiding eye contact and praying no one would single her out. When everyone had settled in, Mr. Harris cleared his throat and gestured toward the doorway. "Before we get started," he said, his tone unusually formal, "I'd like to introduce someone who has joined us today." He paused dramatically, stepping aside to reveal none other than Chuck Norris himself. Gone was the flannel shirt and cowboy hat. Instead, he stood tall in a neatly pressed suit, exuding an air of quiet authority. His sharp blue eyes scanned the room, taking in each face with a thoughtful expression. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then, slowly, murmurs spread through the crowd. "Is that really him?" someone whispered. "Wait, Chuck Norris owns this place?" another asked incredulously. Emily felt her stomach twist into knots. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floorboards and avoid whatever came next. Surely he was here to address her complaints, or worse, to confront her directly. But Chuck surprised them all. Instead of launching into a lecture or reprimand, he smiled warmly and stepped forward. "Thank you all for your hard work today," he began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "I know it's not always easy, but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you do to keep this diner running smoothly." His words were simple yet sincere, and they seemed to resonate with the staff. A few people exchanged glances, clearly touched by the unexpected praise. Emily, however, remained frozen, her hands gripping the edge of her chair tightly. Was he setting them up for something? She braced herself for the other shoe to drop. Then Chuck turned his attention to Emily. "In particular," he continued, his gaze locking onto hers, "I'd like to acknowledge one of our waitresses, Emily Carter." Her heart sank. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. She forced herself to look up, expecting disappointment or anger in his eyes, but instead she found only warmth and admiration. "Earlier today," Chuck explained, addressing the entire room, "Emily shared some valuable insights with me about the challenges you all face in this line of work. She spoke honestly about the frustrations of dealing with difficult customers, the importance of fair compensation, and the need for recognition when things go well." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Her honesty reminded me of why I opened this cafe in the first place. To create a space where people feel valued, not just the customers but the employees too." The room erupted into murmurs of surprise. Some of the staff glanced at Emily with newfound respect, while others simply looked confused. As for Emily herself, she was speechless. Never in a million years had she expected Chuck Norris to frame her complaints as anything positive. If anything, she'd assumed he'd see her as ungrateful or overly critical. Yet here he was, praising her for speaking her mind. Chuck went on to explain that he'd been conducting undercover visits to his restaurants over the past few months, posing as a regular customer to gain first-hand experience of what it was like to work in his establishments. "I've learned a lot during these visits," he admitted, his tone reflective. "And Emily's perspective today gave me even more clarity. It's clear that while many of you love your jobs, there are areas where we can improve, starting with better support for our staff." He outlined several changes he planned to implement immediately: higher base wages to ensure financial stability, a new system for reporting customer complaints without fear of retaliation, and quarterly bonuses, based on performance reviews. Each announcement was met with applause, though Emily barely registered the details. Her mind was still reeling from the fact that her offhand venting session had led to such significant improvements. When the meeting concluded, Chuck dismissed everyone except Emily. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. Nodding nervously, Emily followed him into the break room, her heart pounding in her chest. Once the door closed behind them, she braced herself for whatever was coming next. To her astonishment, Chuck extended his hand. "Emily, I owe you a thank you," he said simply. Stunned, she shook his hand automatically, unsure how to respond. "You've given me a fresh perspective on what it means to lead, not just as a business owner but as someone responsible for the well-being of others. Your honesty took courage, and I admire that." Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes. For so long she'd felt invisible, like her efforts went unnoticed and her struggles didn't matter. Hearing Chuck validate her experiences and express gratitude for them was overwhelming. I didn't mean to complain," she stammered, embarrassed. "I thought you were just a traveler. I never imagined." Chuck chuckled softly, waving away her apology. "Don't worry about it," he said with a reassuring smile. "Sometimes the best feedback comes when people think no one's listening. You reminded me that leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about listening, learning, and adapting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope, handing it to her. "This is for you," he explained. "Consider it a token of my appreciation, not just for today, but for everything you contribute to this cafe every single day." Hesitant but curious, Emily opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check for $5,000, along with a handwritten note thanking her for her dedication and resilience. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is more than I ever expected." "You deserve it," Chuck replied firmly. "And remember, this isn't just about you. It's about recognizing the value of every person who works here. You've inspired me to make changes that will benefit everyone." As Emily left the break room a short while later, clutching the envelope tightly, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in ages, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen and appreciated, in a way, that filled her with hope for the future. The days that followed Chuck Norris's visit to Chuck's Corner Cafe brought a wave of change that swept through the diner like a fresh breeze. Emily, still reeling from her private conversation with Chuck, found herself walking on air. The envelope he'd handed her wasn't just a financial gift. It was a symbol of validation, something she hadn't realized she needed so desperately. As word spread among the staff about the meeting and the planned improvements, the atmosphere at the cafe began to shift. At first, some employees were skeptical. "Do you think it's real?" one of the cooks whispered during a break. "Or is this just another empty promise?" But as the changes started rolling out, their doubts melted away. Within a week, new wage slips arrived in everyone's mailboxes, showing a noticeable bump in pay. For Emily, who had been struggling to make ends meet, the increase meant she could finally pay off some of her mounting bills and even set aside a little money for Jake's college fund. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about feeling valued for the first time in years. Chuck didn't stop there. He introduced a system where employees could anonymously report issues they encountered with customers or management, ensuring no one felt pressured to stay silent. A bulletin board went up in the break room titled, "Your Voice Matters," encouraging staff to share ideas for improving the diner. Suggestions range from adding healthier menu options to hosting monthly team-building events. To everyone's surprise, Chuck implemented several of these ideas almost immediately, proving he wasn't just paying lip service. He genuinely cared about what his employees thought. For Emily, the transformation was personal. She noticed how much lighter the mood felt at work. Servers laughed more freely, cooks moved with renewed energy, and even the regular customers seemed to pick up on the positive vibe. One elderly patron named Mrs. Thompson, who came in every Thursday for her favorite chicken pot pie, remarked, "This place feels different lately. Happier." Emily smiled proudly, knowing she'd played a small part in making that happen. Chuck continued to visit the diner regularly, always taking time to chat with the staff and check in on how things were going. Each interaction reminded Emily of the man behind the legend, humble, kind, and deeply invested in the people around him. Their conversations became less formal over time, evolving into genuine exchanges of ideas and stories. On one occasion, Chuck asked Emily about her dreams. Beyond working at the diner, startled by the question, she hesitated before admitting she'd always wanted to open her own bakery someday, a dream she'd long buried under the weight of responsibility. To her astonishment, Chuck lit up at the idea. "That's fantastic," he said enthusiastically. "Why haven't you pursued it?" Emily shrugged, listing the usual obstacles: lack of funds, fear of failure, and the overwhelming demands of caring for Jake. Chuck listened intently, nodding thoughtfully. "You know," he said after a moment, "sometimes we let fear hold us back because we don't believe in ourselves. But I see potential in you, Emily. Don't let life pass you by without trying." His words lingered in her mind long after their conversation ended. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, Emily allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to turn her dream into reality. Could she really do it? With Chuck's encouragement ringing in her ears, the idea no longer seemed impossible. It felt attainable, though still daunting. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of Chuck's visit extended beyond the walls of Chuck's Corner Cafe. News of the owner's generosity and hands-on approach spread quickly through the small town. Locals began flocking to the diner not just for its food, but to catch a glimpse of the man himself. Some even joked that eating at the cafe was like dining with a celebrity, though Chuck remained unfazed by the attention. He treated every customer with the same warmth and respect he showed his employees, further solidifying his reputation as a true community leader. One afternoon, as Emily served a table of tourists eager to snap selfies with Chuck, she overheard them talking about how rare it was to find someone so successful who still cared deeply about others. "Most rich people forget where they came from," one of them said. "But look at him, he's here helping his staff and listening to their needs. That's real strength." Emily couldn't agree more. In her eyes, Chuck Norris wasn't just a famous actor or businessman. He was proof that kindness and humility could inspire greatness in others. Despite the newfound fame surrounding the diner, Emily never lost sight of why she loved her job. Sure, there were still tough days, rude customers, hectic rushes, and the occasional spilled drink, but now, she faced them with a renewed sense of purpose. Knowing that her efforts were appreciated, both by her co-workers and by Chuck himself, made all the difference. Even Jake noticed a change in her demeanor. "You seem happier lately," he commented one evening as they sat together at the kitchen table. "Did something good happen?" Emily grinned, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Let's just say, I've been reminded of how important it is to speak your truth," she replied cryptically. "And sometimes doing that can lead to amazing things." As weeks turned into months, Emily found herself growing closer to Chuck, not as an employer but as a mentor and friend. They often discussed her aspirations, with Chuck offering advice and encouragement whenever she doubted herself. "Starting a business isn't easy," he warned gently during one of their talks. "There will be challenges, setbacks, and moments when you'll want to give up. But if you're passionate about it, if it makes your heart sing, then it's worth fighting for." Inspired by his belief in her, Emily began taking small steps toward her dream. She enrolled in online baking classes, experimenting with recipes during her free time. She saved portions of her bonus and increased wages, dreaming of the day she'd have enough to rent a storefront. And whenever doubt crept in, she remembered Chuck's words, "Don't let fear hold you back." Looking back on everything that had transpired since that fateful afternoon when she'd vented to a stranger at the counter, Emily marveled at how life had a way of surprising you. What had started as an innocent complaint had blossomed into something extraordinary, a chain reaction of positivity and growth that touched everyone involved. Chuck Norris may have been the catalyst, but the real magic lay in the power of honesty, empathy, and connection. By the time autumn leaves began painting the hillsides in shades of gold and crimson, Chuck's Corner Cafe had become more than just a diner. It was a symbol of hope and resilience. And for Emily Carter, it marked the beginning of a journey she'd once thought impossible, a path toward creating something truly her own. Months passed, and the changes at Chuck's Corner Cafe continued to ripple outward, touching not only the staff, but also the community. Emily had fully embraced her role as both a waitress and a budding entrepreneur, finding joy in balancing her responsibilities while nurturing her dream of opening a bakery. The diner itself became a hub of positivity, its walls adorned with colorful artwork created by local schoolchildren, and its menu featuring healthier options inspired by employee suggestions. Customers noticed the difference too. There was an undeniable warmth in the air, a sense that this place wasn't just about food, it was about connection. Emily's relationship with Chuck Norris deepened over time, evolving into something akin to a mentorship. He visited the cafe regularly, always making a point to check in with her and the rest of the team. These visits weren't just casual drop-ins, they were opportunities for him to share wisdom, encourage creativity, and remind everyone of their potential. For Emily, these moments were invaluable. She began to see Chuck not as a distant celebrity or intimidating figure, but as someone who genuinely cared about helping others succeed. One crisp autumn morning, as golden sunlight streamed through the diner windows, Chuck pulled Emily aside, after the breakfast rush. "How are those baking classes going?" he asked with a knowing smile. Emily laughed nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Honestly, they're harder than I thought," she admitted. "I mean, I can follow recipes pretty well, but coming up with my own ideas is daunting." Chuck nodded sympathetically. "Creativity takes practice just like anything else," he said. "But don't forget, you already have a unique perspective. Think about what makes your baking special. What sets you apart?" Emily hesitated, considering his question. Over the past few months, she'd experimented with flavors inspired by memories from her childhood. Warm apple pie infused with cinnamon, chocolate chip cookies with a hint of sea salt, and buttery biscuits reminiscent of Sunday dinners at her grandmother's house. Her creations weren't flashy or complicated, they were simple, comforting, and full of heart. That's what made them special. "I think it's the stories behind the recipes," she said finally. "Every dish has meaning to me. It's like sharing a piece of my life with whoever eats it." Chuck's eyes lit up. "Exactly," he said firmly. "That's your edge right there. People don't just want delicious food, they want an experience. Something that resonates with them emotionally. If you can capture that feeling in your bakery, you'll create something truly unforgettable." His words stayed with Emily long after their conversation ended. That evening, as she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by recipe books and scribbled notes, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about starting a business, it was about creating a space where people could feel connected, comforted, and cared for, a bakery rooted in nostalgia, kindness, and authenticity. She decided then and there to name it Emily's Hearth, a nod to the warmth and love she hoped to infuse into every bite. With Chuck's guidance, Emily began laying the groundwork for her dream. He introduced her to a local real estate agent, who helped her scout affordable storefronts, many of which were tucked away on quiet side streets perfect for a cozy bakery. He also connected her with a financial advisor who walked her through budgeting, loans, and marketing strategies. Though the process was daunting, Emily found solace in the fact that she wasn't alone. Jake, ever supportive, pitched in by designing a logo for Emily's Hearth, a whimsical illustration of a wooden cabin with smoke curling from its chimney, surrounded by rolling hills and wildflowers. As winter approached, bringing frost-kissed mornings and twinkling holiday lights, Emily's hard work started paying off. She secured a small loan, found a charming little space near the town square, and began renovating it with help from friends and family. The walls were painted a soft cream color, shelves lined with jars of homemade jams and preserves, and a vintage sign above the door read, "Welcome Home." Every detail reflected her personality and vision, from the rustic wooden tables to the playlist of gentle jazz music that played softly in the background. When Emily's Hearth officially opened its doors one snowy December morning, the turnout exceeded all expectations. Locals braved the cold to line up outside, eager to sample Emily's signature treats and celebrate her achievement. Inside, the air smelled of freshly baked bread and spiced cider, while cheerful chatter filled the room. Chuck arrived early, surprising Emily with a bouquet of flowers and a heartfelt hug. "You've earned this moment," he told her, pride evident in his voice. "Never forget how far you've come." The day flew by in a blur of laughter, hugs, and countless batches of cookies. By evening, Emily collapsed onto a stool behind the counter, exhausted but elated. Looking around at the bustling bakery, the happy faces, the empty display cases, the handwritten thank you notes left by customers, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. Word of Emily's Hearth spread quickly, drawing visitors from neighboring towns and even tourists passing through. Its reputation grew not just because of the delicious food, but because of the care and passion poured into every aspect of the operation. Emily hired 2 part-time assistants, both former co-workers from the diner, ensuring the bakery maintained its friendly, community-focused vibe. She also introduced monthly events such as cookie decorating workshops for kids and afternoon tea sessions featuring live acoustic performances. Despite her success, Emily never forgot the lessons she'd learned along the way, or the man who had helped her believe in herself. Chuck remained a constant presence in her life, popping in occasionally to try new recipes or simply chat about how things were going. Their friendship had blossomed into something rare and meaningful, a bond built on mutual respect, trust, and shared dreams. For Chuck, watching Emily thrive was deeply fulfilling. He often reflected on how their chance encounter at the diner had sparked so much growth, not just for her but for everyone involved. It reinforced his belief that true strength lies not in fame or fortune, but in lifting others up and empowering them to reach their full potential. As spring returned to the small town, painting the hillsides with vibrant blooms, Emily stood outside Emily's hearth one sunny morning, sipping coffee and watching the world wake up. Life hadn't always been easy, and challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. But for the first time in years, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. After all, she reminded herself with a smile, sometimes speaking your truth, even to a stranger, can lead to extraordinary things. This chapter captures Emily's journey toward realizing her dream, highlighting the support she receives from Chuck and the community. It emphasizes themes of perseverance, creativity, and the transformative power of believing in oneself. As the months rolled on, Emily's life took on a rhythm she had once only dreamed of. Emily's hearth became more than just a bakery. It was a cornerstone of the community, a place where people gathered to share laughter, stories, and moments of connection. Regulars began to form routines. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who loved chicken pot pie at the diner, now came in every Tuesday for a slice of Emily's famous apple cinnamon cake. Families stopped by after school to pick up warm loaves of bread or boxes of cookies, while young couples lingered over cups of spiced hot chocolate during chilly evenings. The bakery wasn't just feeding stomachs, it was nourishing hearts. For Emily, running her own business brought challenges she hadn't anticipated. There were days when the ovens broke down, orders piled up faster than she could fulfill them, or unexpected expenses threatened to derail her carefully planned budget. Yet, through it all, she remained steadfast. Each obstacle taught her something new, how to troubleshoot problems, manage her time better, and trust her instincts. She also leaned heavily on the friendships she'd built along the way, whether it was Jake stepping in to help decorate cupcakes or Chuck offering sage advice. Over coffee, Chuck Norris too continued to play an integral role in Emily's journey. Though he didn't live in the small town, he made regular visits to check on her progress and offer encouragement. Their conversations often veered beyond business, delving into deeper topics about life, purpose, and resilience. "You know," Chuck said one afternoon as they sat together at a corner table in the bakery, "success isn't measured by how much money you make or how many awards you win. It's about the impact you have on others, the lives you touch, and the legacy you leave behind." Emily nodded thoughtfully, sipping her tea. "I think I'm starting to understand that," she replied. "Every day I see customers walk out of here smiling, or kids leaving with crumbs on their faces and happiness in their eyes. That feels like success to me." Chuck smiled warmly, clearly proud of the woman sitting across from him. "Exactly. You're creating something bigger than yourself, and that's what makes it meaningful." One of the most profound lessons Emily learned during this time was the importance of gratitude, not just for the opportunities she'd been given, but for the struggles that had shaped her. She often reflected on the day she'd vented to Chuck at the diner, unaware of who he really was. At the time, she'd felt embarrassed and vulnerable, fearing judgment or punishment. But looking back, she realized that moment of honesty had been a turning point. It had opened doors she never knew existed and reminded her that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than weakness. With this newfound perspective, Emily decided to pay it forward. Inspired by Chuck's generosity and leadership, she implemented initiatives at Emily's hearth to support others in the community. For example, she started a program called Pay It Forward Fridays, where customers could purchase extra baked goods to be donated to local shelters or food banks. She also hosted free workshops for aspiring bakers, sharing tips and tricks she'd picked up along the way. Her goal was simple: to create a space where everyone felt welcome, valued, and inspired to pursue their dreams. The ripple effects of these efforts extended far beyond the bakery. One day, a young girl named Lily walked in with her mother, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Shyly, she handed it to Emily. On it was a drawing of a bakery surrounded by flowers, along with the words, "Thank you for showing me I can do anything." Emily's heart swelled as she knelt down to hug the child. Moments like these reminded her why she'd worked so hard to build Emily's hearth. It wasn't just about selling pastries. It was about planting seeds of hope and possibility in the hearts of others. Meanwhile, Chuck continued to inspire those around him, both directly and indirectly. His visits to the cafe and the bakery became legendary, drawing crowds eager to meet the man whose humility matched his fame. He used these opportunities to reinforce the values he held dear: kindness, empathy, and perseverance. During one particularly memorable visit, he addressed a group of high school students who had come to tour Emily's hearth. "Life will throw curveballs at you," he told them earnestly. "There will be times when you feel like giving up, but remember this. Greatness isn't born from comfort, it's forged through struggle. Keep pushing forward, stay true to yourself, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it." His words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking lively discussions among the teens long after he'd left. For Emily, hearing Chuck speak reinforced her belief in the power of mentorship. She vowed to carry that torch herself, using her experiences to guide and uplift others. By summer, Emily's hearth had become a beloved fixture in the town, celebrated not only for its delicious treats, but for the spirit of warmth and inclusivity it embodied. To mark the occasion, Emily organized a community festival in the town square, complete with live music, games, and, of course, a bake sale featuring her signature creations. Chuck attended naturally, drawing cheers from the crowd as he cut the ceremonial ribbon alongside Emily. Together they unveiled a plaque dedicated to the bakery, inscribed with the words, "A place where dreams are baked with love." As fireworks lit up the night sky, casting colorful reflections on the faces of the gathered townsfolk, Emily stood quietly beside Chuck, taking it all in. She thought about how far she'd come since that quiet afternoon at the diner, when frustration and fatigue had driven her to confide in a stranger. Back then, she couldn't have imagined the twists and turns her life would take, or the incredible person who would emerge from them. "Thank you," she said softly, turning to Chuck. "For everything. I wouldn't be here without you." Chuck placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "Don't thank me," he replied. "This is your story, Emily. All I did was remind you of the strength you already had inside you. Never forget that. You're capable of amazing things." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but they were tears of joy. In that moment, she understood that life's greatest achievements weren't the result of solitary effort, but of connections forged, lessons shared, and hearts touched along the way. From a humble waitress struggling to make ends meet to the proud owner of a thriving bakery, she had transformed not only her circumstances but also the lives of those around her. And so, as the festival wound down and the stars twinkled overhead, Emily looked toward the future with optimism and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. With a supportive community, a cherished friend like Chuck, and the unwavering belief that speaking your truth could change the world, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. Because sometimes, the simplest acts of courage, like sharing your frustrations with a stranger, could lead to extraordinary outcomes. And for Emily Carter, that was proof enough that anything was possible.